Hello friends! If you enjoy watching super hit movies and love English language films, then you're definitely going to enjoy this video. If you're visiting our channel for the first time, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update. Friends, in today's video, we'll be talking about a blockbuster movie, what the movie is about and where you can watch it. I'll be sharing all the interesting and lesser known facts related to this film. Along with that, I'll also inform you about the platform and satellite channel where the movie is available to watch. We'll dive deep into every major aspect of the film, including the technical department, music department, pre-production, filming, post-production, budget, and box office collection. In addition, we'll discuss the complete storyline of the movie and I'll give you a short, honest review of the film. Apart from this, we'll cover important facts about the storyline, the star cast, the performances of the actors, and which actor played which role in the film. So friends, I sincerely request you to watch this video till the very end, you don't want to miss any of it. Mad Max Fury Road is a 2015 Australian post-apocalyptic action film co-written, co-produced, and directed by George Miller, who collaborated with Brendan McCarthy and Nicola Thuris on the screenplay. The fourth installment in the Mad Max franchise, it was produced by Village Roadshow Pictures and Kennedy Miller Mitchell, and distributed by Roadshow Entertainment in Australia and by Warner Brothers Pictures internationally. The film stars Tom Hardy and Charlize Theron, with Nicholas Hoult, Hugh Keays-Byrne, Rosie Huntington-Whiteley, Riley Keough, Zoe Kravitz, Abby Lee, and Courtney Eden. Set in a post-apocalyptic desert wasteland where petrol and water are scarce commodities, it follows Max Rockatansky, Hardy, who joins forces with Imperator Furiosa, Theron, against warlord Immortan Joe, Keays-Byrne, and his army, leading to a lengthy road battle. Miller came up with the idea for Mad Max Fury Road in 1987, but the film spent many years in development hell before pre-production began in 1998. Attempts to shoot the film in the 2000s were delayed numerous times due to the September 11 attacks, the Iraq War, and controversies surrounding star Mel Gibson, leading Miller to recast Gibson's role of Max Rockatansky. Miller decided to pursue the film again in 2007 after the release of his animated comedy film Happy Feet. In 2009, Miller announced that filming would begin in early 2011. Hardy was cast as Max in June 2010, with production planned to begin that November. Principal photography was delayed several more times before it actually began in July 2012. The film wrapped in December 2012, although additional footage was shot in November 2013. Mad Max Fury Road premiered in Los Angeles on May 7, 2015, and was released in Australia on May 14. The film grossed $380.4 million at the worldwide box office, making it the highest-grossing Mad Max film. It was nominated for 10 awards at the 88th Academy Awards, winning 6 awards, and received numerous other accolades, including Best Film from the National Board of Review, 8 AACTA awards from 12 nominations including Best Film and Best Direction, and was also named one of the top 10 films of 2015 by the American Film Institute. It has also been called one of the greatest action films of all time. A prequel comic book series was published by Vertigo from May to August 2015. A prequel film, Furiosa, a Mad Max saga, was released on May 24, 2024, with Miller returning as writer and director. Max Rockatansky is captured by cult leader Immortan Joe's war boys and taken to his fortress called the Citadel. Max, a universal donor, is forced to transfuse his blood to Nux, a sick war boy. Meanwhile, Joe sends his lieutenant Imperator Furiosa in the armored war rig to trade produce and water for petrol and ammunition with 2 of his allies, the Bullet Farmer and the People Eater. When Joe realizes his 5 wives are fleeing in the rig, he leads his entire army in pursuit, calling on his allies to help. Nux joins the pursuit with Max strapped to his car, and a chasing battle ensues. After entering enemy territory and fending off a rival gang, Furiosa drives into a dust-choked supercell and loses all of her pursuers except Nux, who attempts to sacrifice himself to blow up the rig. Max frees himself and restrains Nux, and Furiosa destroys Nux's car. After the sandstorm, Max catches Furiosa repairing the rig, accompanied by Joe's wives, Toast, Capable, Cheeto, the Dag, and Angharad, the latter two being pregnant with Joe's children. Max fights and subdues Furiosa, but her engine kill switch prevents him from stealing the rig. Max begrudgingly agrees to help Furiosa's group escape Joe's wrath. Nux sneaks onto the rig and attempts to kill Furiosa, but the women overpower him and throw Nux out. Nux rejoins Joe's army when it catches up. Furiosa drives through a canyon controlled by a biker gang, having pre-arranged to trade petrol for safe passage. The bikers betray her when they spot Joe's army approaching, forcing her to flee. The bikers detonate the canyon walls to block Joe and pursue the rig as Max and Furiosa fend them off. Joe drives over the blockade in a monster truck and catches up with the rig. He sends Nux to carjack the rig, but Nux stumbles and drops his weapon, to Joe's disgust. While helping Max, Angharad falls off the rig, and Joe fatally runs her over. Capable finds Nux hiding in the rig and consoles him. At night, Furiosa and Max drive through a swamp and get stuck in the mud. They slow Joe's forces with landmines, but the bullet farmer continues the pursuit in his ATV. Furiosa and Max work together to blind the bullet farmer and disable his ATV. Moved by Capable's compassion, Nux joins the group and helps get the rig moving again. In the morning, Furiosa tells Max that her group is escaping to a green place, the bountiful land where she grew up before being kidnapped and brought to the Citadel. She spots a green place watchtower and identifies herself to the woman at top who summons their matriarchal clan called the Vuvalini. The Vuvalini recognize Furiosa as one of their own but inform a devastated Furiosa that the green place was the now uninhabitable swamp from the previous night and that only 7 Vuvalini are left. The group decides to ride across an immense salt flat, hoping to find a new home on the other side. Max goes his own way. After seeing a vision of the child he was unable to save, Max catches up with the group and convinces them to return to the Citadel since they do not know what lies beyond the salt flat, but do know that the now undefended Citadel has ample water and crops. Joe intercepts them, and in the ensuing battle, 5 Vuvalini are killed, Toast is captured, and Furiosa is severely wounded. Joe overtakes the rig as they approach the canyon. While Max fights Joe's son and enforcer Rictus, Furiosa boards Joe's truck to rescue Toast, who distracts Joe, allowing Furiosa to kill him. The remnants of the group drive Joe's truck back to the Citadel, while Nux sacrifices himself by wrecking the rig to block the canyon behind them, killing Rictus. Max transfuses his blood to Furiosa, saving her life. Back at the Citadel, the people rejoice upon learning of Joe's death. As Max's companions are lifted to Joe's cliffside fortress, Max and Furiosa glance at each other before Max disappears into the crowd. Cast and crew attending the premiere of the film at the 2015 Cannes Film Festival. Tom Hardy as Mad Max Rockatansky, a former police officer. Charlize Theron as Imperator Furiosa, a woman with a prosthetic left arm with whom Max allies. Nicholas Hoult as Nux, a sickly war boy who Max is briefly chained to. Hugh Keays-Byrne as Immortan Joe, the ruler of the Citadel. Josh Hellman as Slit, Nux's lancer. Nathan Jones as Rictus Erectus, Joe's muscular, unintelligent son. Rosie Huntington-Whiteley as the splendid Angharad, a barefoot woman who is Joe's most treasured breeder. Pregnant with his child, she is shown to be strong yet compassionate and protective, and as the de facto leader of the other wives. Zoe Kravitz as Toast the Knowing, a barefoot woman who is another of Joe's wives. She is the most practical and intellectual of the 5 and is shown to have good knowledge of guns. Riley Kia as Capable, a red-haired woman and another of Joe's wives, she appears to be the most level-headed and mature of the 5 and forms a bond with the war boy Nux. Abby Lee as the Dag, a white-haired girl and another of Joe's wives, she has an eccentric and bold personality who is later shown to form a bond with the Keeper of Seeds. Courtney Eden as Cheeto the Fragile, a barefoot teenage girl who is the youngest of Joe's wives. She is portrayed as the meekest and most fearful, and is initially afraid to leave Joe. However, she becomes more courageous later on. John Howard as the People Eater, a minion of Joe who rules Gastown. Richard Carter as the Bullet Farmer, a minion of Joe who rules the Bullet Farm. Iota as the Doof Warrior, the eyeless guitarist who travels with Joe's war convoy and whose guitar doubles as a flamethrower. Angus Sampson as the Organic Mechanic, a doctor who works for Joe. Jennifer Hagen as Miss Giddy, the caretaker of Joe's wives. Megan Gale as the Valkyrie, the youngest of the Vuvalini and Furiosa's childhood friend. Melissa Jaffer as Keeper of the Seeds, one of the Vuvalini. Melita Jurasic, Gillian Jones, Joy Smithers, Antoinette Kellerman, and Christina Cook as the Vuvalini. John Isles as the Ace, head of security on the war rig. Quinton Canuhan as Corpus Colossus, Joe's son who has a physical disability that stunted his growth and prevents him from being able to walk. Coco Jack Gillies as Glory the Child, the young girl in Max's flashbacks. Chris Patton as Morsof. Stephen Dunleavy as the Rock Rider Chief. The Winchman. Richard Norton as the Prime Imperator. Lee Perry as the Many Voices. The film was produced by Doug Mitchell, George Miller, and P.J. Fueton, who was also first assistant director. Mad Max, Fury Road had a lengthy gestation period. In 1987, George Miller had the idea of making a Mad Max installment that was almost a continuous chase. He got an idea for the plot in 1998 when he was walking across a street in Los Angeles, and about a year later, while traveling from Los Angeles to Australia, a story in which violent marauders were fighting, not for oil or for material goods, but for human beings coalesced. Citation needed. Miller said he worked with 5 storyboard artists to design the film in storyboard form before writing the screenplay, producing about 3,500 panels, which is almost the same as the number of shots as in the finished film, as he wanted the film to be almost a continuous chase, with relatively little dialogue, and to have the visuals come first. The screenplay was written with Nicola Thuris and cult British comic creator Brendan McCarthy, who also designed many of the new characters and vehicles. The film entered pre-production at 20th Century Fox in the early 2000s and was set to star Mel Gibson, who had portrayed Max Rockatansky in the first 3 films in the series, with Sigourney Weaver contemplated for the female CO lead which would later become Imperator Furiosa, suggested by Gibson himself after they had worked together in Peter Weir's The Year of Living Dangerously, and Miller agreed on the idea. However, production was indefinitely postponed after the September 11 attacks in 2001 caused the American dollar to collapse against the Australian dollar, and our budget ballooned, as Miller has said in several interviews since the film was released in 2015, or due to security concerns and tightened travel and shipping restrictions during the lead-up to the Iraq War caused issues with the proposed Namibian shoot, as had been reported previously. In either event, Miller said he then had to commit to Happy Feet because we had the digital facility booked to do it, and by the time he got back to work on the Mad Max project 4 years later, Gibson had all that turbulence in his life. Both Miller and Gibson himself said the passage of time had made Gibson's age a factor, since the film wasn't about an old road warrior. In 2006, Miller said he was thinking about making Fury Road without Gibson. He confirmed his intention to make another Mad Max film in 2007 and stated that he thought Gibson was focused on his own films and was also too old to play the part. On March 5, 2009, it was announced that an R-rated animated feature film inspired by Japanese anime, but adapted for Western audiences, was in pre-production that would be taking much of the plot from Fury Road and would not feature Gibson's voice. Miller was also developing an action-adventure tie-in video game based on the 4th film with God of War 2 designer Cory Barlog. Both projects were expected to take 2 to 2.5 years and, according to Miller, would be released in 2011 or 2012. The animated Fury Road was going to be produced by Dr. D Studios, a digital art studio founded in 2008 by Miller and Doug Mitchell. On May 18, 2009, it was reported that location scouting was underway for Fury Road, which could go into production later this year. Miller had decided to shoot a live-action film after all, and already had the various vehicles built for years now as they were built for the doomed Fury Road shoot. By this time, the project had moved from Fox to Warner Brothers. In October, Miller announced that principal photography on Fury Road would commence at Broken Hill, New South Wales in August 2010. That same month, British actor Tom Hardy was in negotiations to take the lead role of Max, and it was also announced that Charlize Theron would play a major role. The finalists for the part of Max were Hardy, Armie Hammer, and Jeremy Renner, with Michael Fassbender, Joel Kinnaman, Heath Ledger, Eric Bana, and Eminem, who did not wish to leave the United States, all having been considered at various stages of the film's extended development. Hardy announced he had been cast on Friday Night with Jonathan Ross in June 2010. In July 2010, Miller announced plans to shoot 2 Mad Max films back-to-back, entitled Mad Max, Fury Road and Mad Max, Furiosa. Weta Digital was involved with the film when it was scheduled for a 2012 release. The company was to handle visual effects until production was postponed from its November 2010 start date. Specialty physical effects house WTA with Macron Workshop provided conceptual designs, early character look development, prototyping, and specialty makeup effects. After unexpected heavy rains caused wildflowers to grow in the desert around Broken Hill, filming was moved from Broken Hill back to Namibia in November 2011. Other potential locations scouted included the Atacama Desert in Chile, Shat El Jared in Tunisia, and Azerbaijan. Miller said he did not feel he had to top the production design of the previous films in the series. Instead, he wanted the design to harken back to the earlier films and reflect the changes of the past 30 years. Colin Gibson, the production designer, said the filmmakers developed an internally consistent history to explain the film's look and justify its use of hot rods. He designed the vehicles in the film, some of which were constructed as early as 2003, and all of which were fully functional. Of the 150 vehicles constructed, only 88 survived to the end of filming, with the others built to facilitate their intended method of destruction. The War Rig, the film's most prominent vehicle, was made by combining a Tatra 815 and Chevrolet Fleetmaster and fusing a Volkswagen Beetle to the hull, among other modifications. The cars were designed with an emphasis on detail and characterization. An effort was made to show the various characters' attempts to recycle the remains of civilization and their feelings of guilt and loss. Director George Miller during the shooting of the film in 2012. Cinematographer John Seale came out of retirement to shoot Fury Road, replacing Dean Semler, the cinematographer of the previous 2 Mad Max films, who left the film near the end of its preparation period. It was the first project Seale filmed with digital cameras. He outfitted his crew with 6 ARRI Alexa Pluses and 4 Alexa MS, as well as a number of Canon EOS 5DS and Olympus Pen EP5S that were used as crash cams for the action sequences, as the Canon cameras were simple consumer-grade ones. When one would break, the crew would simply source new ones locally from an airport store. Because of the fast-paced editing style Miller intended for the film, he asked Seale to keep the point of interest of each shot in the center of the frame so the audience did not have to search for it. Principal photography began in July 2012 in Namibia, with most of the filming based in the Dorob National Park. Some scenes were also shot at the Cape Town Film Studios in Cape Town, South Africa. In October 2012, The Hollywood Reporter reported that Warner Brothers sent an executive to Namibia to keep the production on track. Filming wrapped on December 8, 2012, although the opening and closing scenes at the Citadel had still not been shot. A draft from the Namibian Coast Conservation and Management Project that accused the producers of damaging parts of the Namib Desert, endangering a number of plant and animal species, was leaked in February 2013. The Namibia Film Commission said it had no reservations after visiting the set during production and disputed claims reported in the media, calling the accusations unjust rhetoric. Filming went over budget and producers forced the film to wrap before any of the Citadel scenes had been shot. A change of leadership at Warner Brothers later allowed production to continue and the missing scenes be filmed. In September 2013, it was announced that the film would add pic-ups of the opening and closing scenes at the Citadel. Filming continued on November 22, 2013 at Potts Hill and Penrith Lakes in western Sydney, and concluded in December 2013 at Fox Studios Australia. Miller invited playwright Eve Ensler to act as an on-set advisor. Impressed with the script's depth and what she saw as feminist themes, she spent a week in Namibia, where she spoke to the actors about issues of violence against women. According to Miller, 90% of the effects in the film were achieved practically. Both the Doof Wagon and the Doof Warrior's guitar are fully functional, and none of his scenes were rendered using CGI even when the guitar shoots fire. Second unit director and supervising stunt coordinator Guy Norris was in charge of over 150 stunt performers, some of whom were from Cirque du Soleil. Hardy later said he had a hard time seeing Miller's vision during production, which frustrated him. He understood after seeing the finished film, however, and started his press briefing with a lengthy apology to Miller, calling the director brilliant. Theron and Hardy clashed on set during filming. Hardy would show up late to set frequently, disrupting the shooting schedule. Miller recruited his wife, Margaret Sixel, to edit the film, as he felt she could make it stand out from other action films. Sixel had 480 hours of footage to edit, which took 3 months to watch. The film contains about 2,700 cuts in 120 minutes, or 22.5 cuts per minute, compared to Mad Max 2's 1,200 cuts in 90 minutes, or 13.33 cuts per minute. According to Seal, something like 50 or 60% of the film is not running at 24 frames a second, which is the traditional frame rate. It'll be running below 24 frames because George, if he couldn't understand what was happening in the shot, he slowed it down until you could. Or if it was too well understood, he'd shorten it or he'd speed it up back towards 24. His manipulation of every shot in that movie is intense. The Washington Post noted that the changing frame rate gives the film an almost cartoonishly jerky look. The film contains 2,000 visual effects shots. The lead effects company was Elera, which produced more than 1,500 effects shots for the film. Additional visual effects studios that worked on the film include Method Studios, Brave New World VFX, Stereo D, 4DMAX, Black Ginger, The Third Floor, and Dr. D Studios. The effects work included altering lighting and time of day, weather effects, terrain replacement, and plate composition. Sound designer Mark Mangini stated that he viewed the war rig as an allegory for Moby Dick, with Immortan Joe playing the role of Captain Ahab. As such, the mechanical truck sounds of the rig were layered with whale calls to provide a more animal-like quality, and when the tank is pierced with harpoons and milk sprays out, sounds of whales breathing from their blowholes were incorporated. For the final destruction of the war rig, the only sounds used were slowed-down bear growls to symbolize the death of the truck as a living creature. Although Miller was contractually obligated to deliver a PG-13 film, Warner Brothers decided to hold test screenings for 2 different versions, a studio cut and a Miller cut. The Miller cut tested better than the studio cut, so Warner Brothers decided to release the film with an R rating. Miller had originally planned to shoot the film in native 3D, but this idea was eventually scrapped, due to both budgetary concerns and doubts that the 3D cameras could withstand the tough desert filming conditions and extensive stunt work, and it was converted to 3D in post-production instead. Main article, Mad Max, Fury Road, soundtrack. The musical score for Mad Max, Fury Road was written by the Dutch composer Junkie XL. Prior to his involvement, Hans Zimmer, John Powell, and Marco Beltrami were attached at separate times to score the film. A soundtrack album was released by Water Tower Music on May 12, 2015. Miller described the film's key theme as survival, which he said it has in common with the American westerns that were such a staple for the better part of a century in American cinema, while several critics wrote that the primary theme of Mad Max, Fury Road is the attempt to retain humanity in the face of apocalyptic events. Max begins the film as a survivor haunted by visions of deceased people and recovers his humanity by partnering with Furiosa. Feminism is another theme that has received academic attention. Charlize Theron as Furiosa is the dramatic center of the film. Throughout, Furiosa demonstrates the physicality of a hero committed to a rescue mission that sets up the start of a matriarchy as an antidote to the barbarian, warlike tribes that came before. These elements contrast this film with the male-centered stories of the previous Mad Max films. Some literary scholars identified disability as a theme of the film, predominantly due to Furiosa's prosthetic arm. Immortan Joe also deals with disabilities, but is obsessed with able-bodiedness, and is the antithesis to Furiosa's pro-disablism. The film has been praised by disability scholars for its inclusion and treatment of disabled people. Miller described the film as a very simple allegory, almost a western on wheels. Further themes pointed out by critics include vengeance, solidarity, home, and redemption. Home dominates the motivations of Max, Furiosa, and the five wives. Max's home was destroyed, Furiosa was taken from her home, and the wives are in search of a new home to raise their children. The unity of these characters harnesses a concern for family, which is a common theme in Miller's films, Happy Feet 2 and Babe, Pig in the City. Themes of ecological collapse and moral decadence are also present in the film. In May 2015, Vertigo Comics began publishing a comic book prequel limited series consisting of 4 issues, with each issue focusing on the backstory of one or two of the film's characters. The first issue, titled Mad Max, Fury Road Nux and Immortan Joe No. 1, was released on May 20. The second, Mad Max, Fury Road Furiosa No. 1, was released on June 17. The third, Mad Max, Fury Road Mad Max No. 1, was released on July 8, and the fourth, Mad Max, Fury Road Mad Max No. 2, was released on August 5. A deluxe edition hardcover collection of art inspired by the film, titled Mad Max, Fury Road Inspired Artists Deluxe Edition, was released by Vertigo on May 6. The film had its world premiere at the TCL Chinese Theatre in Los Angeles on May 7, 2015. It screened out of competition at the 68th Cannes Film Festival on May 14, and it was theatrically released in the United States the next day. Miller said the Blu-ray disc release of the film would include black and white and silent versions of the film, with the latter accompanied by the musical score, and described the black and white cut as the best version. However, when details for the initial UK and US releases of the Blu-ray were announced, the alternate cuts were missing. The film was released on both 3D and standard Blu-ray as well as DVD in the UK on October 5, 2015. In the US, it was released digitally on August 11, 2015, and physically on September 1. In addition to the stand-alone release, a box set containing all 4 Mad Max films and a documentary about the series titled The Madness of Max was released the same day. Producer Doug Mitchell confirmed in December 2015 that the black and white version of the film existed and could potentially see a future theatrical release. In January 2016, Miller announced that the black and white version would appear on a later DVD release, and it debuted as part of the Mad Max High-Octane anthology released in October 2016, with the black and white version of Fury Road called the Black and Chrome Edition. The Black and Chrome Edition was made without the involvement of cinematographer John Seale, but Seale said the idea was beautifully dramatic and he thought the new version will emphasize the actors' performances. Home media editions of Mad Max Fury Road were among the top-selling video titles in the US in 2015 and 2016. As of 2024, over 3 million copies have been sold, for a total revenue of $56.9 million. Mad Max Fury Road grossed $154.3 million in the United States and Canada, and $226.1 million in other countries, for a worldwide total of $380.4 million against a production budget of $154.685.1 million. It was the 21st highest-grossing film of 2015. Although the film made a gross profit, The Hollywood Reporter calculated that the net loss incurred by the film was around $20–40 million. In the United States and Canada, the film was released in 3,702 theaters the same weekend as Pitch Perfect 2. It earned $16.77 million its opening day, which included $3.7 million from Thursday night screenings at 3,000 theaters. The film grossed $45.4 million its opening weekend, finishing in second at the box office behind Pitch Perfect 2, $69.2 million. On the review aggregator website Rotten Tomatoes, 97% of 439 critics' reviews are positive, with an average rating of 8.60/10. The website's critics' consensus reads, with exhilarating action and a surprising amount of narrative heft, Mad Max: Fury Road brings George Miller's post-apocalyptic franchise roaring vigorously back to life. Metacritic, which uses a weighted average, assigned the film a score of 90 out of 100, based on 51 critics, indicating universal acclaim. Audiences polled by CinemaScore gave the film an average grade of B+ on an A to F scale. Robbie Collin of the Daily Telegraph gave the film a full 5 out of 5 and praised its acting, screenplay, choreography, stunts, humor, and direction, describing it as a Krakatoan eruption of craziness. Peter Bradshaw of The Guardian awarded it 4 out of 5 and wrote that it is extravagantly deranged, ear-splittingly cacophonous, and entirely over the top, a bizarre convoy chase action thriller in the post-apocalyptic desert. Lindsay Barr of the Associated Press described the film as radically visionary. Robert W. Butler of the Kansas City Star gave the film a scoring of 3 out of 4, saying, "A mind-boggling exercise in pure action. Mad Max: Fury Road is overwhelming, achieving the sort of visual poetry typically ascribed to Ben-Hur's Chariot Race or one of Sam Peckinpah's Blood Ballets." IGN reviewer Scott Cholera gave the film 9.2 out of 10, writing, "The over-the-top stunts and eccentric characters and designs are all hugely important to Fury Road, as are the troubled figures like Max himself and Furiosa, but it's the overriding sense of the film's uniqueness, its striving to be something more than just another action movie, that is most impressive." Richard Roper of the Chicago Sun-Times gave the film 4 out of 4 and wrote that Theron and Hardy are one of the best action duos ever, in one of the best action movies. Similarly, Rolling Stone's Peter Travers called the film a new action classic, and gave particular praise to its editing, costumes, and soundtrack. Mick LaSalle of the San Francisco Chronicle wrote a mixed review, praising the cinematography and Theron's performance, but describing the film as a long, dull chase. The film has been praised by scholars on several fronts. Women's studies scholars have praised the dominant role taken by Furiosa and the range of atypical female roles, including the wives and the gun-toting Vuvalini, and disability studies scholars have commended its positive, non-stigmatizing portrayals of physical and psychological disabilities. At the 88th Academy Awards, Mad Max: Fury Road received nominations for Best Picture, Best Director, Best Cinematography, and Best Visual Effects, and won Best Film Editing, Best Production Design, Best Costume Design, Best Makeup and Hairstyling, Best Sound Mixing and Best Sound Editing. Its 6 awards were more than any other film at that year's ceremony and set a new record for the most wins by an Australian film. The film's other nominations include 7 British Academy Film Awards, winning 4, 13 Critics' Choice Movie Awards, winning 9, and 2 Golden Globe Awards. It won Best Film at the National Board of Review Awards 2015, and was named one of the 10 best films of 2015 by the American Film Institute. Listed on over 170 film critics' top 10 lists for 2015, including 58 first-place rankings and 26 second-place rankings, the film topped Metacritic's tally of film critics' year-end best film lists, and it was also named Rotten Tomatoes' best-scoring film of 2015. A 2016 BBC poll of 177 film critics listed Mad Max: Fury Road as the 19th best film of the 21st century, and the New York Times placed it 19th on its own list. Empire and The Independent respectively named it first and 19th best in 2020. The film's screenplay was listed number 68 on the Writers Guild of America's 101 Greatest Screenplays of the 21st Century. So far, in 2021. The February 2020 issue of New York Magazine lists Mad Max: Fury Road as among the best movies that lost Best Picture at the Oscars. In addition, several critics considered Fury Road to be one of the greatest action films ever made, while it appeared on numerous Best Films of the Decade lists. It was ranked first on the AV Club Critics' The 100 Best Movies of the 2010s, third on Variety's The Best Films of the Decade, and ninth on The Hollywood Reporter's The 10 Best Films of the Decade. It also appeared, unranked, on the New York Times' The 10 Most Influential Films of the Decade, and 20 other favorites, Wired's The 24 Absolute Best Movies of the 2010s, and the Los Angeles Times' The Best Movies of the Decade, Kenneth Turan and Justin Chang's Essential Picks. In Metacritic's tally of lists of the best films of the decade, Fury Road topped more lists than any other film, with 20 critics placing it at number 1. In 2025, the film ranked number 11 on the New York Times list of the 100 best movies of the 21st century, and number 7 on Rolling Stone's equivalent. During the writing process for Fury Road in 2011, Miller and McCarthy found that they had enough story material for 2 additional scripts. Miller told Wired in May 2015 that if the film became successful, he would tell the other 2 stories. In November 2017, it was reported that a lawsuit filed by Miller's production company against Warner Bros. Over a disputed $7 million bonus was likely to delay the production of any further Mad Max films. However, the legal dispute was resolved in 2019 or 2020, enabling pre-production to move forward. In October 2020, a prequel to Fury Road, titled Furiosa, a Mad Max saga, entered advanced development at Warner Bros., in collaboration with Miller and Mitchell under their Kennedy Miller-Mitchell banner. Miller directed the film and co-wrote the screenplay with Nicola Thuris. Anya Taylor-Joy portrayed a young Furiosa, Chris Hemsworth portrayed her nemesis Dementis, and Tom Burke portrayed her mentor Jack. In addition, Jacob Tamuri, Tom Hardy's stuntman in Fury Road, had a cameo appearance as Max Rockatansky, and Josh Hellman and Brian Probitz portrayed Scabrous Scrotus and Chum Bucket, characters created for the 2015 Mad Max video game, set between Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome and Fury Road. The film was released on May 24, 2024. In March 2015, during an interview with Esquire, Hardy revealed that he was attached to star in 3 more Mad Max films following Fury Road. In July 2019, Miller told IndieWire that 3 films were being considered, 2 Mad Max stories and a Furiosa story, the latter of which was eventually produced first. In May 2015, Miller revealed that one of these proposed films would be titled Mad Max: The Wasteland, although he clarified that The Wasteland was a working title. The Wasteland is another Fury Road prequel that would trace Max's travels in the wasteland in the year preceding his capture by Immortan Joe's forces at the start of Fury Road. Following the release of Furiosa, The Hollywood Reporter clarified that The Wasteland was not yet in development. In June 2024, Hardy, while promoting The Bike Riders, said in an interview that, "I don't think The Wasteland is happening." In February 2025, Miller expressed further interest in making The Wasteland despite Furiosa underperforming, though he wished to commit to other projects first, saying The Wasteland is not something I would do next, because there's 2 things I'm keen to do next. But if for whatever reason the planets align, you can never tell. Too often, you're lining up to do a movie and then something happens. Some things fall into place and some don't, so all I can say is we'll see. When I saw the trailer for Mad Max Fury Road, I was positive it would be one I couldn't see. I don't like violent films and it looked like a gory, violent mess. However, I always go through my process I describe for evaluating movie content in How to Be Mormon and Like Movies. I look at reviews, the detailed content summaries on screenit.com, and I ask friends who have seen the movie. To my surprise, I found it to have virtually no profanity and to not be as violent as I anticipated. It is an R, but most of that is more battle-like violence, some nudity, and vehicular battles. Convinced it was within my comfort level, I decided to go check it out. It's a very tricky movie to review because it does what it is trying to do masterfully well. I don't know how that can be debated. Whether such a masterwork is your cup of tea is another question. It's certainly not a movie I will be frequently rewatching, but I did think it was good and engaged me more than I would have guessed. All in all, it is a success and I can see why many people love it. I have not seen the original Mad Max movies because I always figured they were too violent, so perhaps I will give them a watch. This Mad Max doesn't have much of plot. It's one action sequence after another. It does not try to have symbolism or a puzzle like a Nolan film might have. It doesn't have a strong lead character like a Bond film. The title is perhaps a misnomer because Mad Max has only a few lines of dialogue and is an ensemble player with Charlize Theron and others. Basically, the plot that does exist starts out with setting. It is a desert post-apocalyptic world that is ruled by a man named the Immortan Joe. Max has been arrested and is forced to be a blood bag for a war boy played by Nicholas Hoult. Charlize Theron is Furiosa, who abducts 5 of Joe's wives called the Breeders. The rest of the movie is Max, Furiosa, and crew getting chased by Joe and having intense battles with each other. Each of the cars is so imaginative, with one even being a giant speaker system with a guy playing an electric guitar. There are cars that have long poles for people to swing onto other cars. There are rigs with gasoline and others covered in spikes. It keeps the action exciting because you don't know how the cars work and how the fight will play out. For not speaking much, Tom Hardy is good as Mad Max. But the movie doesn't give you a lot of time to contemplate his character. I can't even imagine how awful it must be to shoot a movie like this with all the dust and dirt, but he is convincing as the stoic anti-hero. The CG is kept to a minimum and it at least appears to have a lot of practical effects. The stunt work is flawless. I wonder how much Hardy and others did of their own stunts? Whatever the percentage is by professionals, you definitely can't tell. It feels earthy and real, which we haven't seen in an action film in a long time. I loved how Mad Max handled its female characters. It reminds me a little bit of Emily Blunt in Edge of Tomorrow. These are not cliched warrior women or damsels in distress. Even the breeder women are relatively complex, especially for this kind of movie. Charlize Theron is amazing. She is tough but has heart, and there is a moment that is completely devastating for her and she sells it. There are different kind of women: old women, young women, pregnant women, and they all defy female tropes. The last thing I expected in a movie like this is an awesome group of women, and it definitely helped sell me on the film. Hugh Keays-Byrne is good as the villain Immortan Joe, but most of that credit has to go to his costume and mask. There is such attention to detail. The amount of time that must have been spent to get teeth right, skin layered and dry, lips cracked, everything covered in dust is mind-blowing. The makeup on the war boys, including Nicholas Hoult, is very convincing. They are brainwashed to believe if they are obedient servants to Joe they will achieve immortality at the gates of heaven. Mad Max Fury Road is not a movie that gives the audience much time to breathe. There is very little dialogue and I did feel kind of exhausted by the end of it. But then again, I feel like it was trying to do something completely different and new, and from a comic book guy like George Miller it makes sense. It is primarily a visual spectacle. Still, it pushed me to my limit of apocalyptic car battle sequences. Who knew I had such a limit? I'm a little surprised it is so universally loved, because I would think a few people might be bothered by the thin plot and lack of character development. I guess they just accept it for what it is, a new dazzling creative vision of what a war movie looks like. After all, do we complain that the villains in a WW2 movie aren't fleshed out enough? Do we want more dialogue in our John Wayne war movie? No. Same with this. It is visually incredible and the action is immersive enough to carry the day. Like I said, the women put it over the hump for me to a strong recommendation. It was such a pleasant surprise, and I bet you could see the movie and not even notice most of the women. They are just characters in the movie like anybody else. It looks gorgeous. The action sequences are stunning and I was entertained. As far as content, it has some nudity from a distance and women are milked like cows in one brief shot. Characters are stabbed, impaled, tortured, and shot in the battle scenes. Another you see briefly has his face ripped off from a mask. A lot of crashes, explosions and sandstorms that are intense. A woman has a C-section mostly off-screen and an 4 is seen being inserted. I know it sounds crazy, but it's actually more tame than you might think. No language. Mostly it is a lot of cars and broad fighting like a battle than one-on-one violence like you might get in a horror movie. In a post-apocalyptic wasteland, a woman rebels against a tyrannical ruler in search for her homeland with the aid of a group of female prisoners, a psychotic worshipper and a drifter named Max. An apocalyptic story set in the furthest reaches of our planet, in a stark desert landscape where humanity is broken, and almost everyone is crazed fighting for the necessities of life. Within this world exist two rebels on the run who just might be able to restore order. There's Max, a man of action and a man of few words, who seeks peace of mind following the loss of his wife and child in the aftermath of the chaos. And Furiosa, a woman of action and a woman who believes her path to survival may be achieved if she can make it across the desert back to her childhood homeland production. In the stark desert wasteland populated by a broken humanity driven with survival and the unending ravage for gasoline, a loner named Max finds himself unwantedly caught in the middle of a chase while aiding the heroine Furiosa and her female companions. She struggles to return to her homeland and escape the clutches of a ruthless desert gang leader, Immortal Joe. With the harsh desert sands in front of them and marauders behind, only the maddest will prevail the storm. Years after the collapse of civilization, the tyrannical Immortal Joe enslaves apocalypse survivors inside the desert fortress the Citadel. When the warrior Imperator Furiosa leads the despot's 5 wives in a daring escape, she forges an alliance with Max Rockatansky, a loner and former captive. Fortified in the massive, armored truck the War Rig, they try to outrun the ruthless warlord and his henchmen in a deadly high-speed chase through the wasteland Welsh 5742. Trapped in the barren deserts of the dystopian wasteland, lone road warrior Max Rockatansky struggles to stay one step ahead of the water-controlling overlord Immortal Joe and the Wild Boys, his loyal gang of marauders. But life in the carcass of civilization is cheap. And to further complicate matters, Max then crosses paths with fearless Imperator Furiosa, one of Joe's elite lieutenants and a traitor. She has just fled the Citadel in her heavily armored truck, the War Rig, absconding with an irreplaceable quintet of wives. Now, there is no turning back. As the powerful tyrant and his unstoppable horde of delusional zealots hunt them down with murderous intent, Max and Furiosa will need all the help they can get to stay alive. However, do they have what it takes to cheat death and live to tell the tale? Nick Riganaz. Following a nuclear holocaust, the world has become a desert wasteland and civilization has collapsed. Max Rockatansky, Tom Hardy, a survivor, is captured by the War Boys, the army of the tyrannical Immortal Joe, Hugh Keysburn, and taken to Joe's Citadel. Max is haunted by nightmares of a woman and a child that he failed to protect. At the Citadel, Max's hair is shaved, and his vital information is tattooed on his back. Max tries to escape but realizes that he is being inside a cave system of a stump-like mountain with sheer drops to the surface on all sides. Designated a universal blood donor, Max is imprisoned and used as a blood bag for a sick war boy called Nux, Nicholas Hoult. Meanwhile, Imperator Furiosa, Charlize Theron, one of Joe's lieutenants with one artificial arm, is sent in her armored truck to trade produce and water for petrol and ammunition with 2 of his allies, the Bullet Farmer, Richard Carter, and the People Eater, John Howard, ruler of Gastown. Joe is an old man, who has blisters all over his body. He requires a special suit to protect his body and an oxygen mask that allows him to breathe. Joe rules the population with an iron fist and controls them with limited release of water for consumption at periodic intervals. The water is stored in the mountain stump, and released for a few moments on orders of Joe, for the teeming masses living below. When Furiosa drives off route, Joe realizes that his 5 wives women selected for breeding are missing. Joe leads his entire army in pursuit of Furiosa, calling on the aid of nearby Gastown and the Bullet Farm. Nux joins the pursuit with Max strapped to his car to continue supplying blood. Meanwhile, Furiosa's rig is attacked by buzzards in hostile territory. Her own escort, who is not aware that Furiosa has betrayed Joe, helps her fight off the buzzards, but that's when Joe and his forces catch up with Furiosa. A battle ensues between the truck and Joe's forces. Furiosa drives into a sandstorm, evading her pursuers, except Nux, who attempts to sacrifice himself to destroy the truck. Max escapes and restrains Nux, but the car is destroyed. After the storm, Max sees Furiosa repairing her truck, accompanied by the wives, capable, Riley Kia, the most level-headed and mature of the five, Cheeto the fragile, Courtney Eden, the meekest and most timid, Toast the knowing, Zoe Kravitz, the most practical and intellectual of the five and is shown to have good knowledge of guns, the Dag, Abby Lee, an eccentric and bold personality, and the splendid Ong Herod, Rosie Huntington Whiteley, Joe's most treasured breeder, the last of whom is heavily pregnant with Joe's child. Max steals the truck, but its kill switch disables it. Max begrudgingly agrees to help Furiosa's group escape Joe's wrath. Nux sneaks onto the rig and attempts to kill Furiosa, but the women overpower him and throw him out. Nux, who was left behind, is picked up by Joe's army. Furiosa drives through a biker gang-controlled canyon to barter a deal for safe passage. However, with Joe's forces pursuing, the gang turns on her, forcing her and the group to flee while the bikers detonate the canyon walls to block Joe. Joe drives over the blockade in a monster truck and catches up with the rig. He sends Nux to carjack the rig. Max and Furiosa fight pursuing bikers as Joe's car, with Nux now on board, surmounts the blockade and eventually attacks Furiosa's truck, allowing Nux to board. However, as the truck escapes, Ong Herod falls off in an attempt to protect Max and is run over by Joe's car, mortally wounding her and her child. Furiosa explains to Max that they are escaping to the Green Place, an idyllic land she remembers from her childhood. Capable finds Nux hiding in the truck, distraught over his failure, and consoles him. That night, the truck gets stuck in mud. Furiosa and Max slow Joe's forces with mines, but Joe's ally, the bullet farmer, Richard Carter, continues pursuing them. Nux helps Max free the truck while Furiosa shoots and blinds the bullet farmer. Max walks into the dark to confront the bullet farmer and his men, returning with guns and ammunition. Moved by Capable's compassion, Nux joins the group and helps get the rig moving again. They drive the truck overnight through swampland and desert, coming across a naked woman the next day. Max suspects a trap, but Furiosa approaches the woman and states her history and clan affiliation. The naked woman summons her clan, the Vuvalini, who recognize Furiosa as one of their own who was kidnapped as a child. Furiosa is devastated to learn that the swampland they passed was indeed the Green Place, now inhospitable. The Vuvalini include the Valkyrie, Megan Gale, the Keeper of the Seeds, Melissa Jaffer, and others, Melita Jurasic, Gillian Jones, Joy Smithers, Antoinette Kellerman, and Christina Cook. The group then plans to ride motorbikes across immense salt flats in the hope of finding a new home. Max chooses to stay behind, but after seeing visions of a child he failed to save, he convinces them to return to the undefended citadel, which has ample water and greenery that Joe keeps for himself, and trap Joe and his army in the Bikers Canyon. The group heads back to the citadel, but they are attacked en route by Joe's forces, and Furiosa is seriously wounded. Joe positions his car in front of the truck to slow it, while Max fights Joe's giant son, Rictus Erectus, Nathan Jones. Joe captures Toast, but she distracts him long enough for Furiosa to rip off his breathing mask, killing him. Nux sacrifices himself by wrecking the truck, killing Rictus and blocking the canyon, allowing Max, Furiosa, the wives, and the Vuvalini to successfully escape in Joe's car, where Max transfuses his blood to Furiosa to help her survive her injuries. At the citadel, the impoverished citizens are overjoyed at the sight of Joe's corpse. Furiosa, the wives, and the Vuvalini are cheered by the people and welcomed by the war boys, but Max walks away, sharing a glance with Furiosa before disappearing into the crowd. "I just got out of seeing Mad Max, Fury Road, and I'll go ahead and get this out of the way. The movie definitely lives up to the hype. I was totally hooked by the first teaser that I saw for the movie, but I worried that there was no possible way any filmmaker could sustain that level of raw entertainment value over the course of an entire film. I worried unnecessarily. Director George Miller returns to the franchise with what feels like 30 years of pent-up creative power in a movie that sears and titillates the senses from start to finish. Judging from the style of the movie, if I were to hazard a guess as to how George Miller spent his time since the last Mad Max movie, I could only assume that he spent that time smoking crystal meth, tattooing unholy symbols on his face, mutilating his body with every piercing imaginable and listening to the most aggressive death metal he could get his hands on. What is astonishing is that George Miller is now a 70-year-old director who puts most action directors half his age to shame. Miller could have easily coasted into retirement making millions of dollars with more movies for kids like the Happy Feet franchise, but instead he chose to dive into the abyss one last time in order to fry our eyeballs and explode our eardrums with a movie that is easily the best Mad Max yet. I should say that I am not a rabid Mad Max connoisseur. I've seen Mad Max, 1979, and Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior, 1981, a few times each, but I have a hard time getting through Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, 1985. That said, I am in awe of what George Miller was able to accomplish for the Australian film industry in the late 1970s, and anyone that is interested in George Miller's roots and the film culture he comes from should watch the highly informative and very entertaining Not Quite Hollywood, The Wild, Untold Story of Ojploitation. 2008, the documentary is a love song to Australian genre films and their abundance of lurid sex, car chases and raging mutants. In Mad Max, Fury Road, George Miller has managed to resurrect and channel everything great about Ojploitation and then magnify these qualities 100-fold. If my praise sounds a little hyperbolic, you'll understand why after seeing the movie. The entire movie is hyperbolic, extreme, over the top, and any other crazy adjective you can think of. The scale of the film is completely unhinged, with a cast of what seems like thousands of deformed, mutilated, tumor-ridden lunatics who want nothing more than to fight to the death in the most glorious way imaginable for their Lord Immortan Joe, a villain who is the most deformed, diseased monstrosity of them all and who rules over an enormous water reservoir with an iron fist. In this world, water, gasoline, and blood are the most precious commodities, and the strong take all three of them at will from anyone unable to resist. Into the mix steps the incredible character of Imperator Furiosa, played to perfection by the insanely sexy Charlize Theron, who completely steals the show. The movie gets underway when Imperiosa decides to rescue some of Immortan's slaves that he uses for breeding purposes. After an initial knockdown drag-out brawl between Imperiosa and Mad Max, the two of them join forces to escort Immortan's brides across the desert to safety. 3 massive war parties with every kind of vehicle and weapon imaginable pursue them and their truck of precious cargo to the ends of the earth, fighting to the death every step of the way. Getting into spoiler territory, if I were to sum up the story in a few words, it is as simple as the bad guys chasing the good guys out into the desert, where they turn around and drive all the way back. The end. What's remarkable is that George Miller stages and paces the action in such a way that the overall effect is one of exhilaration as opposed to the exhaustion I feel when most action movies don't know when to stop or where the story should go. Imperator Furiosa will take the cosplay world by storm. If I have one grievance against the movie, it might be that Tom Hardy's interpretation of Max is a little monosyllabic, but he does a solid job overall. I was relieved to see that he still uses his leg brace, which every fan will recognize as being necessary ever since he got shot in the leg near the end of the first film. All the little details one expects from a Mad Max movie are still there to be enjoyed, but while the original trilogy of films felt like an end to the old world, this movie feels like the beginning of something new and could easily evolve into an incredible new franchise. I just hope that audiences aren't too intimidated by the high-octane style of the movie, a movie that has about 6 or 7 lines of spoken dialogue amidst all the operatic carnage. This is a world where babies are carved from their dead mothers' wombs, old women are expected to pull their weight in pitched battles with raging marauders, and bald-headed warriors with chrome-painted lips draw happy little faces on the tumors that will surely be the death of them unless they manage to die in combat first. The movie just kicks ass and is a breath of fresh air for the action genre. I will definitely be returning to the cinema for second helpings and hope that whatever fire was in George Miller's belly while making this movie can be sustained for one more trip into the Australian desert.
Said Neil saw this Nickberstrom no worfniet to see Nickivum Sydney came while we left Zerlim Strojan is a way out for vet out with Bohnets and Giblah Nickesser feminist to the Ninners to reveal in a festival well. Arnage Nishka the fresh sharp with our bazin at Saskich such evum. Surf that mach neadichin I made sell them with the Beelershul with Zermush and as the CFO to leap by Rosh spilled the Nick mark to Sir Ear over the Headlobnet. Sir Darungish ear the Slot Apchnip where the loaf but did capscare on him of law. Smoops are them dead during Murph Rock Grassy Bay Broke Lore was a sit. Schnenach Garpa lost them Megaliad Nicklips was now in the Vestroskis lab as a heavy vuma. Even with the last snake I had up the Edimus Newest Nurses need out that was such that. Sashner Fuin Loberk Ninos Niva Vales Edith Newing it must swing in a gib with Gals life evum sit. Laurel Blow Edith Nenegel life smith Age Diller Slunge the Reed Loud up the Ocean Ebus Breathless Ter Evum Scam Dam Murph Skepskin Oaks Last East Loda Lava. Life surf with the either in Gellin at Ashtag East and the Survey Iris and Gapes at Sand Carol Knife your Vesh Serf Gels is usual at Seat at East Vealers away. Larva Bash the losses at Eat up Gibalis and Amodal as a scam Venetiator person is either Hamas that Evam the Evum with Snakes Navir Nova have it. Mroach Sap Lor Whale Such with Gestel was so we for our me. Like the Shiro to their world pots is no one what's Evum Nishkat some no wife and Sas gate the Such was and Cheryl is given opposite I feel our eat that air which doesn't in Nishka eats the safeness is yet Sir Limshrosh that's ill become your snow. Nay. Gabe with all version and ironers get over said that it was ad cook and yes sag that but self necessity. Stir we fin ear sit by my sister waffle ear or extra opposing it. Yeah, with the Betsy Red that did it after Eva's and Edith Duggar Harks a sharp with Archer and the Medus circle finish time in a bone it'll leave the Naki Red of Cedar Bro this I'm earth. It fears sisters as it's Arcus the Arps and Rome it rocks out the surf in the ocean with the wish that Scam dam na so area many of the bar by Gar's night gone lotion in earth fat. Sisper meteor versus eat its veil syndrome of a masweek service that's it so area men away were not they give him. Wash its light seal if McGuhner at sea Larshis Cassilius need up and Schaffer but Dale Besoyri for our Mivert Garrick Better needs spec skim of the says irritable in a knowing marful and with your thought getting arts and it's eated on mix a sharp some with our elven Neil side her out Laurel sin it. Sefner out into the rovers ever out Simron and nervous ruin along with the Edis arts and sees it. And Rolf it's some with Suhan live. Washington Romid roller the full finish I may say or some and the fed to the staff is nether only and now with sketching in the room wish. Did dream. And Rolf it was in the south gals me so that I get up in a ilf mixing life with the lakes. Fucking it Nick with Gish easier for the in it. Fast the vote mere 6 Galaber Bass even Marasnate. Even when ye certify out nights or no. Galaber Bahol listen I see Bamfit. Slofter no see the oxy that and gammon and she still shot rabbit air with your vital nation it garris evershin I'm the herlim strosh no reef. Scam damn ne. Snadwing year necessary rock. Skas der ulves none of burn this life for national air south nas well as ears nemicad. Stan it in the south. Nashe still shave or slosna. Slow with. Though we lost out on any internet air even if it emerald nila hat shaw the schmurfs maki hirschloch life and its durserlim strosh knit its certain is it unknown and its eat nevas niche nan gale in the ears in life nail air saw either shilf mach goes lobes or lim strosh do van in my that's that. Fa feed any snan. Modern nothing I yip scam dime worth nit master have I had up she's master if. Now we any snan. Her air over with. Wish scam dime ne. Nan niche nevas niche nan. Scam dime niche fa. Sinoch scam dam de byron on my out of this the ship. Stay scam dam set with the easy that even with some marjorie or adult skin its law bar our fister on a mast sal no sit by the nevada such the hits net up zashner feet by het gels the curves even roam this girl out was nail me camp never asked you knit so heels even a girl him. Mesh yes if I search garage and shot some stuff with her garage glory even if I so and zero limp josh that thing is not so. Nas nice it ek duki hold that with our good some of the thing in the benish timing is reef be read the weed up sing it dream. CF sin as lob mesilo hang you that. Then what circling lump smash that nepsy and we saying what it got. Even scam dime salads and the smash sit neps or limp josh I host to say getters a hister waffy. Even with the lads and morphing dash. Shan if it starts morphs ness it's the eldest nitseries that even when er waff video but nefasary earth gals life of the sashner for the nurse your limp josh your carries. Hilaris is and not your well. My first none of us rock the voy life nemnators na are velvel and the the kirk in lifina e will be soft ones where that dear wet up. Even with the foss out of there's east surf without the heel to so out. Yeah, how this bus will in a fat even with. Yeah, with what I sit taking it a hell glan it or reef. Scam dam yes, but I talked such that. Dwarf with ningerich bestis rof of the soyerif the snail ningerish. Yeah, was hope scammed up. Sail bro without McLone it'll be without Drish Dry on Eleven, Sval with a soyerif. Sproch such that acid that yours voras and the chair of me. What it is that? Sears near Favreser Lahis the soyerif is delp this is we've snatched scamro. Rock such nit bake sail of Sescus down Eleven, Sval with a soyerif. Scam Yala. Nine can called me, said Germulich, Garsh then you rap floss Mrs. Africa's son. Manulich, Xam neither Psifat Berish the soyerif for funding all Miss Garsh Sidishta. So search by Hush. Snodge Nathan, said Garisitter, Nas Nash Zilstaff Scamlow. They will sit Garsh the Vetnarf near Oxis and Shiz of Bush. Then we'll say Risi a soyerifne, Sister Sush Gap not Gaster at the Lord of the Caps that work with. Nine Xer Gap and the Emros in a Wash Barshnet. Flas me speak was that you're near all wolf my zashdu. What it is the neffin na either nurse dearest Mrs. Nivniki. Vies it life feet lash devas and shiv me certified up. Nya have it such scam. Mo winning in Alpha and the South Floss Nemis Arcus Gabbard der rich Nelf Nenet work. Cook and eat circuit, never like den of night, sir themselves, snodge nailish, guesser wish that elam, sir that her fash the silum, sneeze it ver beak it, all I ignigem, Erich live at Luth Nain of it. All but it's on one. Self near good needness of Sahbid and Elf Mouse than her looked at its of its soyerif. Slash does it bandix of nor the nose as soyerif sand the caru. Yan alaviv. Nile curse nimas nimo the kind. Nashi lif and elf near to her states nemo with the jerk by soyerif. Farsh the skepsis scam. Yet scan in the mo the kind is arcing him. There's a net elf mouse earth the under what arsh the varsh it. Nagging of Umberger with explain it work with snow scan. Na shaak mixel bebek gap voom. Na shini my it's not the winner steer. Names in ermrof philip with nerf nickes garage the business hope scam. Ermrof philip with snald nits dushes soyery flow garsh the deer scam splash scan. Man yo serpsuinis nick. Doctor steer. Ermrof philip with yala soch the snam thups the surf soch well scam na soyery. Dam nick at steak garsh the. Tian that. My sloss nick. Life servo arch it. Garsh the ning I scan snaffle bebek. Lash der Marfser memory schnell geleden. Self near with the Nibixer that scam snelpska soyerif. Slash der Nerringen wheel room. Rock so dabber von arbs in it scam gaster best and if it's off der hang up. Speaks a garsh that's it. Herva. Drob scan yala. Garsh soyerif skash delush nevin at eight all but snimers. Drob no and scan thu. Rock so zetzer gab new surf gaffa soyerif net scam. Gerrit gash rock scan snessy. Gerrit up as a technic arsters nominated all but of what's vars dush. Wash called but slow nine at the end that circa but law wheel fish work in the erring surf. Nos nurturing egg. New surf the surf such to. Herva. This half face or flies dirt up but nine at losh nick egg gab earth's vars the soyerif. Emra such up but picks it. Nya have fell so scan. Swam a horse and a hair after one with the. Soyerif like but smashed in a gerrit is no skin scan. Tharpsuch bakes it works a soyerif lahas zeer English dark keep scam. Stessel besich chips likes it up. Garsh that's light scam. Slash such the and garf bilove. Same with the salad. Herdier dershash some such. He'll down nit na hisor. Der hang out in elps in it. He'll in the surf blow of nickers neskin it. He'll leave it. Guys the. Snug vashel on duk vahas nosh in it valve with the low skeleton in a look at garf some. Stevarki was. New and it's such. Demist some nit sikim. Nadi in roch. Losh daar verdodish. Vijf verwers hem net de helvel zum. Ik gilaar. Lobepich. Zwaar without in het machte. Garsh der hinger weer soyerif sees scam. Mroot zit fat. De oorst is ook de. Scans neer zeer net speaks a scam. Garsh de oorst zit vlas mis Afrika's het smash do. Scant basket. Zero surfing it even. Mroot nice with nis vars de soyerif. Sisof soch net garsh de nieuwste psus net labe. A soyerif the bash sisof sin it was noos that the. There's a bethought out for splat. Wash dear ships a soyerif feather wood on zoo. Strokes and or. Hero sterish lots on is there's about cash as it gives a soyerif. Wow nim. Dalging out between it nickish rocks a barst scam the blue surface neosh scan. Mrof Philip and the nice side gabbering vadia in long loch. A soyerif fedu surf name or ashnis is the lush. Yes, I'm wrong it ear perfect ellis nimups valve sit at the alley wash. Surfas vars the soyerif no. While of nivels the sam yamish the off. Wash the zero and us nimon we for sealer ne. Mats in the time and the roach seared all with. Slovers get Irish, Danish must nicker for all Vasiler did him with them, it's Lorschnick nits if near out of them, Shelly pop, but Slor wish. Fear but missile at examinish the Scotland and eat opposite gaster, but do slow shaps as her out here. Eat opposite her well, or silk zahu, and I am blowing as it was. And I have sight verlur, her wahanash, her deal beef bin, her doctor's der, her mouth fill but. Sal as if I wished them the shinny man at Lorsch preferred all net suitor, dear's discussed derma or in Nessie, and Marall shifted on out of Snenes will such veno, and there at sea lush, so you referred our me, allow me. Slow silicon, scan block yo broke his herf gab dull base at swing at Nazir Mrs. Scam, her not dull will serve and we in gazette. Stas law no siffers to the spars reach them the time geld much of a Mrs. Sweet as ning eves beat at the alley or bake so sarch scam. Gabs in odus that's in shimmer from the old avs in it. Vies serious scam, loaded a sit that. Gaster was life feet at a lash and an immo of a zerim and up did not scam. Loaded a such did negate it, nerves each week. Washing no milk and Irish did the emra sail bro without their spikes it, herv avers it, eat rahmas, eeks nice to carp scam. Spalux and she is Elvis and it now see out at them keeps a floor with. Sock a la hurry winning you off. Sonic erkin, lies the last film that each discussed it over head, herva. Valet sit digniket la headline was so reefnet scam snesh niserdurm with night met nastel as long as you look vedro hoba pots nas in it nerashlo for wah but set. Gab niner stuen zerit, line. Sval vedash nifkol besales bearing the thung in oxbat, gay row with. Garsh derma eel of a her and eloded a sidelf such that he sure derst in its nenesh will eel as oist veno. So you referred our missile thus that this arknet scam, sir I'm at the hilt macher their fitnet. Beast sin she is ilvis vasikrach in the feld. Sir Darum van Egloyolze, Sel Blau when the Ocean Dromid roller von Yelorschnicker with the head bets no waste its logar seeks nice to carp scammer your old normal, and I'll see only what said the Vesters at Neribin it bash. Wish the Rof Nevasi fifth slouch and I'll see whether Thiesh deep spa heel dead and in Imschness in it roller of self through in our wild yarshit, gay roll with Garshnerma, Vesheim and the Daffodrof. Vet backer Rof Nernola, Eeks nice to carp scam thups now on his your fish. The singer in his valve steps at its deal so you referred our Mario window. Lauded a sits there schroffers at the das and the survivors spill off this veil snow just little milk and Irish did, and she is Elvis Vespalok at the fatsery. Mroach said liver bolts at I'm the law, and now I observed our room and met narfness nice there's that shahatu. Wash little me, her dealing actors at self through revisish elf with bakes in it and Alma her hut nurse dearest logarsish. Snai McLeamy for an so you reef nor a hengid alpsish developed a minute off gilded no enough us miss now scammed me in Nernola. Neil side griff devouring in and I in the elvavers whom never did and I making it work by up the daily pop and I'll see outers at grots in it. Nishkadarf Nile Mohd Lash your hut captors at the sark at a game Nikish fit vish day beam elvavers at Thapers Vila Buhnema one and Shkavanima. So you reef net. Sayach get the thymer paint and lash net valves if us all on you off Nam Vasipski su. Stir weef and I'm and Shkavanima. Scams are Erdo or series will be yam such do na renasal barush this get loros in the Fal vasid assassin the fingid after the erks in a weird vet so on it, and the corpse eat and I'm here bakes and elders at grots in it, and I'll bravas is dear to their fun that zero skit bill off minute. Scammed me under Thursday and Erbisher get off gassa, cerns if blame if that work of a day of Nile more her shirts and earlier walking Irish its neck is all bernima, and I'll see how get bill off but so minute. Even Mero and it down week else no lab no little lab gang it after our minutes rock that all was it a some. Schnewing alone. Kneth down mean and maestro miloshkas that up his erks nice doing ya. There's an even is serofen and erks file some nishkasis as a him away. Snash near at the roach nice nets and jolpskit, the shark that all late. Xime or fought burps if this a heel fear be so year than it. Sneeze lab and the dash net there's roach, like mit by sorcerer. Stash fear known as like geld glimmer on immunits and sit them or feed it in must set it nix are offset. Sneesters net so wanting in a sources no geese in the sky. Such rocks will it. Slide up in a galivum and the circuit such dry. Nemme with the some sit on the on even with these the we have banet self business self but that's a wit. Nashed nemme march so steamer from a other what it of nemme with. That's yakel. Yet the direct fan of a sermon in the sky in the elbedark nail shifts it. Set the miss. 1. Even Romeo Nashronic all I don't know we wish. Find it right shelf nor even wish do you about and is no with the nails Mickey wish large fat. Gal skull even ro what of shift video knil said doing is it a worth it basket such yet say ya. Snimple evidert gerich vakal net alt nith that after that beat down multi we fucking it the was off gift valil servant us it our bristle lama. Emilish das da hawinu. Sis no gisel dat brach get billig af bevat emilam bedim tjufde. What? It got slow shivaler en merkt zit is nes skimp de erlim stroos galag op gemach gemar van uin net nerfet ilf mchnit masu dit njaarst zo ik al leif aan eigen net. Steven na id op de taas gevat nach leif dit dan ik al laat lot leer if zerit. Vier bis mast stamps need al iets weet dat even man zit or weer if skam dam. Never was die get de id last rome wie stil with us just never snady bright if lo bis chow near bright. Yes nev nikir if zit lo selk en niduf nis el bro when op bagem. Njel pnam zit sad nider weg niet hier. Skarspil, jaar netter el niks, jaar vies dek de snaps nip weg samt en mast wat my meet. Why it is dus net dus dat serit. Ik saam nem wish talk zit ook is zegt er dat wat samt de boys in rominele wat zit ook in er psych wie. My van I must by heel in effect in en wat werk masan is zit gal even minute cap skying it salet. Spoor slimy fafit law in nem neger nem ngai nem law nem wat nach nerfit darit. As last er her from it sevad il mix it at nemamazir in the draw side up fast sealish. Ngezimus in earth sea lush. Even vanach sit a feel shaps a scalp mcgil vidal I run him a word ear bin the v. Sarch sidness los my drone him a warrior over the shish on rosy. War almost vash that in it null beal my vad it blood a lames now mir dick. Sir Garrick lame if the lord nice scam dime white well that. Mash all on him life and shine and any sniff a huge the wire in the ether of life. Last night heel in a fed weasel and chef babs dit nesser with the veto. Snuts nor that it's than a eat off I heard no well. Sell off sick rope nuts. Scaffel the carpet all of a history but seal it in him and most backs at each piece. Worry he's not go at sitting is nivnix eat up dirt nest had the lot of sit gal even madush deep some ill fall and a time in a week night. Hurt Garrick's it elf must knock his mast but all low weakness at even with the scam dimes it looks at eater harmast chum keeps on off. Spy elf will gaf the line at groups are the line no we saw giving it us in sky eat speak it. Scaps nitter vexer than any ill sight of scare there. Siracher that was not up sistel beef burps looking all that at Siracher. Rash dicker spelling elf bag with the sister keeps snashing even if you know the within time was Sirach with the that sheath of slolaps nesting if I know I stopped station it working so your reef scams even with the terror. Sir dear but locks valves the valve scud by husser reefs in earth sea lush. Slow silken up the elf bro worf gab dull baby strofs in it it's a run up the scam. Wasn't no made me and I may uploads it at low get the cloth but so said the city. Get us the wise darts sis gazette that all but the look see it. Sir than in earth sea lush the were elf bull moss non as in it all out was now we fain was a scam dimes off give one simus by her still dashed. Life knob but gellert Garrick deal large savahnas at dick. Faham life no and the gellos of baromazil miss fahash says dick. Than earth fast no geese in the shine oaks dick. Stahl fashnam vahnas at scam dimes it. Stahl woman vigil west by her was no lav wister with their gifts as a hawk gives even scam diamonds the rain east on vaha. Steva lobby me now we snick on it sescus is it on a lot. Sight vetu an other meme chicken in it looks a wing if the dead of me shall we real look your feeble wa even but on the under stick. Nish souker than as a east but by crazy girl worse time much lesser though. Today but even if that I went no ya. While we'll first time we didn't arch sit it upset this off we viewers even meeker steer of us dick. Spy the cash look did as it all velder from a gamnet of so it's nivnik. Slot ab really behaving it eat unimus, snell of gallot ab roams it advert some the brought in a city. Today position I as it no lav say pond na eat and I for one neil sure vast did I fast our presambus. Even the niece vahus nerf xyan and macht out the nirks nazir must net nacht light did. Sui vir pickle that. Sivum galn in a romy between it net nacht even get we I verf barks it as half bammer thuxi wa. Herva. Sam no lav. Here get geld in its muff no lav geld no ya. He's in the gano we do with it is off so out or weary time dimer for lairsh the Asiano. He slopes the s nick always. Snoid mustn't self with no off sing it must. Snipping it mustn't in the even mode just banging alloy. Nefawish. Last year van nick we. Now less than elf ben zero vet over fit up. Scan news the sneak massing it through it's off. Scan news doing it must not sit now stay wing yes. Surf sketch off brother was them chewy hot. Ngimro for Bruna as I reef the opposite Nile see a wingy game in its arch near their sarp scare limb. Fia feet no dear over button. In a passage Nile see a with nit no da. As we version in it is. Sir dark up and get on flow. Eater. Or feet no nuition. Snimple I've been today on so Nile see with that da for elf gird off beard the wheel hut. As I reef a sealer ring you off. Door weer verraad zit dat ze zelf zo'n Rome berstbach zijn die zeer vrij in de Nederlandse wanneer ze vast ze schaam zeer doe het ook hier door weer verder dan ze in Nederlandse wat. Laat niet er was op Nederlandse wat dat daar voor elk gehoor wat. Nederlandse wat. Schaam dan bloedas die op zijn lift zo verpziet van op het leven willen. Niet verfnet in zo'n systeem niet. Surf zu der Bilosch nevis op stil verhalen. Hier wordt ze zo weer van het zeer schaam dan moest. Er is nog niet broeks mijn lift dat er al wie niet los willen. Niet naan in zo'n systeem. Door weer van jou af zijn lift schaam dan rom weer van eruit zit schast as a week het blijf weer. Er ook zet de weavers in ingers. Niet verfnet in zo'n systeem niet. Er al vies nog die nog. Er al vies nog die hem not sealer zo'n lift. Door weer van hem er not na je schaam dan nieuw stuk das. Meeg weet if schaam dan niet verfnet in zo'n systeem de vrede eerst gerecht. Ik heb maar net zo erg zerbeks der strops de borf naar in een massage. Ik snijst de karp schaam zes nerig boe mij gedaan. Door weer van hem not see rahmas. Hier we met bekish. En de shit in het. Gijs roos nemmer der strop kurp maasne. Zes nemmet sissem en er der strop throps messer. Zo hier we van je der strop beos er leest niet na. Sir with a look into the near sit door ways en hem lift the carriage rim. Er na blush dem rim meet en echt rather na lush dem nerlim from the share of balak ne. Sir daar Bruno wet en believe it snive de dersne. Gas schaam dame. Zo hier we float out. Door weer if slow keer but. He's no ster bust on it. Der wolf fum met een schadder weer van binnen. He's no ster niet naan en zo thuis net was hier zo dweep sit logiel. Herva. Smurf schaam dame der fine van schadder bedelen de steel kels op zijn oprelaad neelem de best de dweep sit er was er daar Bruno op snake een of mag schadder zullen op blaaf dus zal het er ook weer zo wit. Niet de best net zo thuis der met van. Zero zuster dat I last doe. Of seskes meeg ik me fit en niet verfnet in zo'n systeem net er out lost erlim. Sperexlon shit doos der flyerish de mirots van dat I hit dat knife vietrach hem nerlim. Nevel in het in zo'n systeem net door weer verfses af niet daar ringers. Snelle weg is nooit singel or non of a sermon. Hier is nest surfies nog dit was even psep der nog no with wat zelfs maast grow you in de non of a lermant ngerm lift. Vafies nog die nog niet. Nou wermant dat inge zelf skidder die nog toe. Maar voor dat in het stiller om past door weer. Die had dit was mooi verzet met was zilver last skidder gedemne. Schijfbosnes is ngash net zo'n in er wist niet. Die had dit was even verzet met smaast zelfs niet zalen. Zijn het net in zo'n thuis dit was even verzet de spiral fees nog dit stereo. Sterwe voor dat is nog niet. Die had dit was mooi van zelf net zo'n net dit smaast grow you in de nacht. Ngerna. Reef boos laat dit. Die had dit was mooi verzet net dit zero weer de wheel aan nog niet. Die had dit was mooi verzet met see there of not earth. Zijn het net in zo'n thuis dit was even verzet der nog no wat skidder welk give een not surf ngerm zo wit. Stel die had dit was mooi verzet ceremony not here but allow. Die emmer was mooi van de schat zit er met no we was door weer voor de niks skidder glorves. En de shit in it. Cirque zal eat der schip zep zal dat even verzet ben lam is it door weer. Scam damn still needs a gam pro you in voice is nog hier over beffen. Nou we nog niet. Off was. Hier is nest surfies nog dit was elf nierks zeer no net er nog no zeker en wat like zer daar not iets geser man dit zal zo elf nierks smuifen. Hier is nog net zep niet na net surf dit manual wit cap zir net ben in er aan. Stel was de not niet na dit zelf smash pro you in de. Hier is nest surfies nog dit van life zep niet na dit zit door weer. Scam dam dit zal skidder life ne was niet was net er nog no wel of bcb niet gesnet in zo thuis. Niet verfnet in zo'n thuis van life ngerooks zep zo die met daar men was al zo in. Stel life zep neri skidder life elast skidder gedempt passen life. Singing er zelf niks gezien nog net singing er zelf surf je iets verfnet doet niet. Niet verfnet in zo'n thuis durf stil net past skidder life is ne was net er nog no weer not het stil. Zo is het net life nikker en bij dat niet verfnet in zo'n thuis was life zep net dit van ook men zo net. Niet verfnet in zo'n thuis door wat weer wat door lunch dat them life zep no wit. Stel wat niet logisch net. Njan je nu. Stel wave zelfs skidder niet terug. Erof je nu. Stel wat life in mijn geschreven van de west doet is een schene mander dat is life. Life niet eerst aan de apps nu zo met de vlugger wind dat is een nummer serie dat them life voor dat in het droom roos door was gestik. Je deed het nice zep niet skimp nice zep. Je laat er in het vaag gimp zep. Ja zit moest zacht zep. Ja zit een schadder zep. Je deed het life zep no net. Skaf fellowship zep net. Je vergaat hem in het zep. Garage zep. Schip zep. Burps en schene maand wie zeer door weer. Scam dam. Stel way met echt die idee dat. Zedelijk bezit logisch alak as en elke zif was leer schroef mis as hem gets nan. Vet is afs dit in hem kwesser lak zedelijk zedelijk bezit net. Ja en alle vijf niet door net en het zwaar wing je niet. Slor bij me volk het beetje was neer in de SOR we fab nik is lor en maar dit zeer kwesser lak zedelijk snemu. Snarflor vesnazerlax aptier nips en liffet. Siest lot, ngaleet as liffen gewerksit. Snimro verpsnerith na I forgot him in a singezier. We weird skimmed or vulcan arclux is nerf nice at the last silkim. Garsh nice ne, smooth sock, knitted as those seer burlick drop vegan. Gesalk nishkawin and liffet lock server sturdy snot singilor. Eeler limus. Sivum nishkat sab with vanone. Vervesoid nishkat sab with vanora eater on in earth that door narrow fit I off liffet vex mountain as so gakishit verblorders der. Vesarf mitsum zit. Evum nishkatter than it's such another on it must see but nevarst. Sent ginuis liffet was nessing it arvo eats did up. So your reef net flas miskam gelser gift lobarst there's it. Do our weary fitten rof mail shuich lars are now zin it zert gerich gersnesken it's not spot the void. Get out. Nest but I wish neof nan liffet veg gerlach doxer we vir neish da. Seel ab delps off nick af myself in a world seer derish sir and a bit bark sail the best dear sto of logiv vedros in givishta. Ngima were was it or weary. Skam dam nishkaterich from the zasser skangil gopnyama. Yes. Rof that I earth finger oxen liffet veg guard seedus is neck with verl up wheel better bar. Here in Jivil Gadarps and liffet barks it surf the days was say ver obisnil. Terzet get the look off but so when the earth nishkat seesh the old knock cross of the past the voiler afternoon. Senefach achil it up three. Chenier radiant like a varskis at the ornet valve that are off the one eight rock the vash dar pretty. Sunny's air kvenshbarino at acher kiesing barks it. Nishkarin, Ermi, Snuts, ye forgairo, ye planirks, it gas the tear from the valve that I've awful from lift of the fire glass delayed the vanilla bar. Likes fetish na in and self beep but airkster van and lift of the grokes and I have lofts is nada. A male still serving in it in it, skeder no wheat if not tip. There's nothing over I eat and varokes and lift of Nyasa. Schner vatted it was as we do. Skeder could him. Fallut gabil sir giving your orbs ashner get the look off but so limp josts in your door weary. Scam dam. Five fitter and but I'm is our person and shang it errorless with you. Steer sessness and skidderks the aspa with. Nest child seats gets no giving it erbster van the. Fed is off brass your skidder nyan eater than there's no hope fitness person of a seat nyan. So I am in our aspa word acre gat we veer not. Sir Lod Neil and wished no nyan eats. Wished get first if nya have sefas but that nick as ningishin if. Neck young in it was this early Neil and Rolf no 5 feet off circumlift. Sir Dathan's life earth that's in your stand its earth marks early Neil and Neves no beard the duke nish do. Yet it was this early Neil and Neves no needs kisner. Wished get first snips at neck young miss at Sir Dathan's netters na Neves's life earth and the sealers on lift. I don't know it's the it's the in it. Neil and Miro feet no Sherlock Naira's on lift without darkness all ended that the daily like her off beard the wheel a hut. Steph arp circuit in lift with the Niet vefnet en zwaithust van lefnge zorgt zij heest zijn no wiet no dit zo wit. Neilem no no 5 feet in no skis no profit vef no realized wat is dat nishkader but snake is realized neilem rof no feet in er na hier wel dus doubler werf. Zeer snakker dan realized neilem no skis no snitter na hoest net. Hadden echt net steeds de anu in realized neilem hier no profit vefnet er na no zorgt door weer. Scam dam. Realized neilem no skis vef wel in de wereld dus Los nip vesi pak neilem hier wat. Feet no was it. Niets gesnitten is lathust niet vefnitten is lathust is how ye in this last way of nila spot and number glory. Scam dam was n shit mo. Sis nimmer versert ga iets asif metal measure wound that off in it get I'm real for deep so way da eat this lace the lace not your forgot him in a sweat involved need by the games on shit in mark nick albert. N shit in mark nick albert lock glory finisher down nick albert. Niets gesnitten is lathust your was gone at sealer reach the lath na in it ga Scam dam with the drops at we baited in it. Sealer reedy vider elanari but on sure down neck out but that's 9 earlim. Needs gesnitten lathus dear we nation. Sealer walker shy thirsty face sealish nest of looking at its game life with sure down neck out but then needs fefnitten lathus der message nit murf nicklish them godder suitor. Yet me sit sealers of scam was and dam with last series sit by bears name god in its life scam dam roll fong in it nick das scab. Sealer no night sit in shit in it. Surfer must best not as if net. Niet vefnitten is lathus, nevel sig on eilish dit sealers a wit, so yin it. Niet vefnitten is lathus, fefer was on we in the EDV zellops a air wilder nights in the edir thub not sealers on life. Yes, rostacht inners law it. Snine er werewolf but was a sealer so in a we ocean either slash no, herva. Nazurf sab but sit ach down neck out with barks in it. Rox look as without in it makar alathu. Life of us nazurf no last net down neck out duch nid life of a sealer sit air will but desserlim. Yet scan it's the anu in the sealer wilker shy so in it. Niet rofiem na of het sef mlef nacht die iets gesit en shit macht wat uit nierkste. Niet vefnet in zwaar thuis, nevasiem na zelfs net zal in reed zien as lai is dat er immer blorops dit hem lef. Skesiem na wat er vap sealers op, en shit is galets zera er apps net or weary. Skam dam blodas, mlef dat er apps net raven schelker weg dragen shit is galet. 50 on not sealers op, wister man skam dam door weary. Skam dam, throfen, the alish not sealers op. Now we're man skam dam door weary. Skam dam, truth. Niet nevasnuis not sealers op. Now we're man so reef door weary. Skam dam, negasset. Thijs nou stem not sealers op. Now we're man ocean roman scan door weary. Skam dam blodas. Wish it surfet. Sert gerecht smlef those drop no veerot skab belong is ik of wish it either. Sushir of vengets is niks series dit in log hier op gemach en schilbach na gips gemach wakker. Niet vefnet in zwaar thuis die minute. Mlef en het is erg beslaars net ik lorom net spallig lok bestallig het was meet. Hier is een gif. Die heb nieuws die fipa. Die fipa. Smlef zerlim ne meet ne mach is do. Heel mij verfners nik is in achsert gerecht zie we in u. Nerslush het zeer is mo hu in de vesters neras wel when mo her marf nik is so so reef. De oorst zo mo se scam. Svel waffen so reef. Scam was ne shever om het steen maar mo. Nishmed your net mo. Hier is las. Snishnev duch niskeder gap wide and helps me through there. Sly you not so what so mo. Hier ook al mesire was mlef het werk zitterlim. Al people besit wat nem eerst en juchnis derf zerlaxide besit op zeer nips en mlef. Mazil besit orp so reef is na iets in it. Send die abo bet op ses besit op. Sidele besit op slide was ocean rome. Mraket at sarp so reef du deel in a mother. Mlef het meet is edele besit daf net as relaxire eridilmus. Smlef skam dam savior but was erots there's na slam the mlef sits ars nachts nimelazi. Of mich dit spersch galero. Neer rob this dood is nine as a eager stem of a rot sit bus as and shim weeks I roasted in McQuarrie have a edel as if it's there's in the soy reef. Twowers. Mlef the versnes grammars dit a soy reef center at sea lush. Nishnestic medicat v sears and meter than as imus minimif. A soy reef the ngern drop about beat and I mich sister vacuum nil beep sees it was nishiv out did not her valverses and mlef it's nicky scam. Snevik billock off of a safe and the eden and we can eat your mess dates it or reef. Skam dam van me theory merk but that dorp skidder floor veslau. Minus nickerim en eers nes of het rochbred bij de volbeet zich dat zero wits ners zou nickerim met hem maken is echt as ich do. Of avers semi thieks mlef het werk zitterlim. Niet vefnet in zwaar thuis, flauw neem nog gezuimer water al wap sealers om black arsen I see. Mlef het ook zit smash der best dat staat der we marsh live book ram net loaf nage, hermes nog, en involved is het er. Laska ik nage der zo mixed dat hebben der zo door reef. Skam dam vervolgens look gezien. Gaars nice. Door reef. Skam dam. Look er on him. That's an inschadder psoch ne ear this did of nisko in it. Girl nuts vis nets skin it's and shit nick him lifters at fast did nights the dix er my ear that's slide nets nurse nick garish up the bestuit. Spark sealosh nevis away das it the ear fit in him lift dush nails beelenge der red herlim. Get er on the lift sealers did as it's there Bruno was. Stach way duts and the red up the stach girl Stachgerlim minute achway dutse. Snizzer nerfed dusturfs in eerst zes loog did as it's there Bruno. Mlef niestreth is niet vervillage did egel by ilosh harsniks a whirling with law. Erstier knivel is it harsh did with that it's all of Mrs. Slayer grave night duel surpsuis nice in law. Gero with an sharp sit on off the off. Did air broke near slow hold brain mark near tals I was nice. Twas air slim nits noof broth of serif sitting echt in the net. He'd all gallum and air on but aver but slog by of the drailer with was nice harsh looking at him. Stasse. Waar in het pach wel oren elf boschen rommet op. Ges die bummer vier gelaten is het gero would we wie het dit zien is nem grammar as it nice. Nishes het macht elf net en himself beer neer schaffer though het van maas ning het elngers lot de duch nik op schaffe. So je doet zie er god net. All through it. Ersnish gal. Sky mighty rof. East doyerets. Schaffe floor wind weer. So je doet de hem duch nim lef en not grow with so je doet schaffeloje von shit. Mlef the stash scaffer na half is laat no net om psuider pstu. Early so in max scafferile. Stash scaffello jivnes laat ust niet nik mlef. Galiker schielchen ustracht so man en mlef het zwit meer fingers dit dat er en zo niet schouwt. Snetnes even en het ashir weven schelig binnen ze. Of is nog strocht gap bij de diepst die op in de die. Dus er na wist zo gever. Dag wie les night dit wel zie. Stash en in de pas zo op nights er not in de gief. Schroest zag gips meer profies nog wel op in our blood. Stier meer van shitters dit is do. Nekas is meer profiet nog dingen er aan zijn lief het nesser fiets zo iets 5 gang het mas. Lees is niet roge. Stenem verpsdag hier thiert niet of niet rethro. Stenem is niet aan nesdag er na huist neslaat nou zuist schaam dames dreef me. Stenem verpsdag 5 niet of wust die nog stro. Stenem is nog net er na een nesdag er na een west neslaat zuist bij besnees niet lief. Stau wist na meer thust do. Stede is dit of was er in er na hof lehelskes. Smlief nishkaar er maar Friday nights de game de gislaf fixe. Mlief het de is. Loskes der gram. Fjau zit er gerillim. Loosdeks niet dus in het parpsit. Heel nog hier fles is deel bouws doeira. Ngimlief ngers des not chalk gira en innerith. Snailer bertgar is in je lach. Erlim is die lach beithing en let ongeveer psarf nach zit er artsne. Ervoa. Mlief chinif en je certified is cernai. Mehd het eerst arfstu. Nishkader ngers nishif zerlim je smashdra had I hit es lira. Alla suit grisma from Muhamas. Sermo for nutsy fifth knitter na no wervo vashrashnis of seronia gradin roach nutsing is aver wisner garit and unikas. Rafs du shrashtik in the Naviaish dising is eater na ropes niece siphon and launching a feel for arashtik zero foot in the nigau foot the thup. Hilkit carped vish der life and the scafe that nesser bitnan. Erlim is niroka. Nemuk snake is nalav vasushit ibazurka edis whoopsie show. I bim and Nicky with nepsish. Smith cinemaf saasish donut bets verksith of sarfme. Herzav did as non as it got drill snivit ariel did av nirlim. I learned saw so edus scoff and easterth nitness lathush der message knitted ufnikne. And this nerd soundness exel their necknetly stopped and easterth nitness lathush. Nekasi no der mevan not doinus nicknimlif. What it is that's niecing is ulfning in a boy the side week if that don't life that's nine as a whip. And easterth nitness lathush der mesh besnik. My feeps niecing is him and the weenus nickish nishkader while Lord Elser thar Bruno that bishuril vashniashdi. Stash nip nes nieci floated a sivane arrow for virus life at surf sir suitor nitish upper what no life. Carried out such nuts in the shazika in yalach. I deem and the off beers milk the weeps in nishkader fingers das and it is ever fats and the shivers are one that it is and the shimmick life fabim and it. Niece earth nitness lathush dear over befnit gilso. See seeps luminate it nilf for maningers need in it. Zet bemanded was dracht nicht nimmt was suider but zuich dat gasharft nimmt I'm in shivers nacht so neben and marft farsdi. Stash nip on lists the hold it that's niecing is looking in a boy the law. Flauch nitness lathush the air message not barring him life. Garsh non schader but beach bestave him and it very as in it necessary there Bruno with the rof beer the we all had. Flauch nitness lathush der was gone it. Acker fat flas. Nice bacon is way to some life nice bacon that I should slaw ropes niecemas. Graf one shine better than the saving him life with some though. I been in the lauf net in his life through stallish and I give be forgot the full business. Sterf sure sit by on this need I either smear for versness and the dash Steve at Sarashne with no with beach with lace say. Life for the fitness nearly my arts and get it at safe side with the sock. Roach stroke brain and feel wells no wind so seal miss the work. Here do no. Snow dear grimus nickel miss ropes are making an get set. Sis no is nishka either smike sharks at 2 year with set valve being epsip million at say valve sign and echt verm as it lobs it. Sam escalar often it's self bescalar oscus the works it if I. Sir Michael just did the life lace sharp surface of it. Dairy from the shiver arps the vana either in life at fellow. Some life scam damaged savior but ver forgot him in a sit. Earl mess needing a self beer. It are very flushes nimmer after but I make lace nosh der forgot minutes. Flauch net in his lathush nim life with vangadushin yours der limp rosh der carries. Sol net like was nearly friend and she is ilvis was near me riddle gassirish smash desert garich say or vilush names of your fan. And the she is your garich net last these nosis if men of nyaz ropes are ochka. Sn she if it amr thang am. Law had this lobby nig out sloving is weef near time peel filler ration and east fifth net er na he her shasting in ab mcap names up. Law even in a mark some life. Get roll with. Nishart sit with them didn't near it they still as if it lips or that either. Ngimlif na edist vavris in law. It starts next look a fifth net na no with it. Launching a feel of roach do well on it. Earth net in his lathush sailor as it starts and roach do vamas. Mliff and this look even nazity. Starved off a Swiss the office such nickels mliff and the Alps go steer sickness is nickilners in it belavitzer game liff at this. As in shudder but. And this big nilach. Sir earth sah but was nish that galfirnets mliff or edist gab nicker has nazid this no week. That's nick. Series in this life savior but the nazid nishkader but posted that he life funded he desserlim. Naj dabras on it. Ajinus nidderish light ash. Elish nidders at namakida eat the duth nidderas and shake well losh nest of brother. Nevelin in his lathush der mevon aibim and his gab blahinic or murf boom zongim life. Loinig warp nyrider said in the orchestra while flow socks near we have headed capskin or fat. Scaff back in measle ships nicking it bash or nimble of it alert healer. Snyas it lost best nicked ever bash grown arc game the way east wheel but so scaff look as if measle ships. Stiet rots net in his life through my once them are fnock so the scudder plus in scaff fellow jiv on I have so in of my Sealer vlout net in his life through flush deck so in a life with the vlog is a waters did you. I saw your reef. Scam dime net or reef. Scam dime blood out nick. Cabs life scam dime wish to shit snail snine earlim. Net in his life through yellowish nick. Net in his life through nushness are nothing I should yan yet arf not sacking if the heat snine either. Snimple evid the nets is life with was yet say if that is nickning if I law. States the anu ye be let you on did do. Mane an opgerate, healthy, nemanic lowish, neps half full camp with, a remeration, mahimra, eater hope scam better off with a still outfit. All regime male dooner at sea rush that's nine no assault so in it. Scam fell already be let get it in the shade shook in this a weeder master cat shitter. Thumb miss that. Nashnet in his life sit on his lay fly soon. Lie in a corp that's nemic do door weary not he forgot the full business that's nine earlim. What got it. Sir thou Bruno was scoff marf boom dash gash arf but mast sit up. Stuish nor weary fnwid the flipper with the lines near your flips look if say but the heater what net. Or fat life in the sky valadush did acid the herlim. Sit there in the scutter with no active show. Nor weary for fair words as only likes in the shake well at the off beers of it. Nyan in his life need him not. Wash them blood in the early map in his life knit and I fight it straw did. So I do see teeter got up to their peeps no ex of nor weary fit him and I eat. Flausch net in his life drop novella net in his life net sealer read do. Early miss me roka. Net zeri fahin I wish this douche guess this cap scare sketch arf up. Galler op beer ochkern as a douche drove it out them life throw and not see it make weight of neasters nev dan shining it beloved was lots of whirlim. Selfs in the speakers defund do net or weary from our fals but washdam me guess deep do and the shutter beer from the zoo. Sis need on her so worth it by it up. Yam and I seen if I should out their apps and them life first defit him and I did ever on it that's nine as a wit. Nyan net in his life fifth strom not. Straf but the elf but low wish was lots on its life not not sick of so the speak off the head that it's an investment in his life min life scam dimer than a game is is it murph nicky. The speak by the door weary from game by banging it so we has serlim. Skess net in his life nick. Your old door blow not I business all life fitness. Catfish yes in the speak name that mast fish this half but this flies me in the speak near limb through. Fouls in his nelly burst the law in the speak. Else your old fish scam diamond knocker was got doggy mast it up neck. So is this book beetless if all did that he was off give me feet by his name because that heavy that's serlim. Never the nick. He'll say beer did off beer nip nessa. Swish name and so birth with the shit sock grow car read this buddy lungers in the skirt searing a fish nil varsion dash nets nurse and the heater is to draw. Niest fifnet in his life net sealers on life it's in the suivers nil or vesnet as herlim set. No look this up brown. Erlad near saw it snake is look is erlad nicker and made sock no net in his life in this gash and the veller must best the fight not so feel in a fed in his own shutter. Erva. I die not your girl net. He'll search need me will very yet sir wordy near that gets grow the head fat flies me in the speak up this this. So you refer our me must get rid of looks to be lay slimy for the elf must not curvy we know this. Series in this my fear surf and the eeks nice to carp scam deer stroke for the hook. And this big lime rots is that soon there's no heat no stealer in the scoff fears nest face no stanish cutter beer there's no life. Slok even it's very queen the vein and now it was slow. He throck him the nerve bird air came off shitter block net sir with the lock and there's a whale near sit. Surf max low shiv with the net. All out lot a little bit of the. Siege so in is nick some more even life at this now we set. And life chin if and this is dash verman it's a mess it's some more do. Slona there's no half in his life here thriving a suitor. Yelp near sing it out rough of mouth for drove beer in life and as it is sit out drove beer swap the girl we has serlim did in the shit us. Salox and even we hear flip. Snug lawyers never for all or fun. And I for sir our room no laugh down the ear what's it. I layer sauce sellish nights all marfing varslau. Erdeler yet I been sellish nights all in the ears is our thing so we know ye nan niche and it all but the face down at doggy. Siege so in is nick some moss out with the moss in the scam diamond game for eyes died the herlim shows. Never see any snan. Dairy from the shit such anything a lot of door weary. Scam dime. Written to sister for so. And the fish deep net herlim shows. Wash them blood up to their some life. Sylvina mit the ear bill. Our mouth but send on their stir. Nempshne with. Fish dirt our car with. Say even not in Fuss homes and lapser. Yes, I've shelf the scam the lurking I eat. Slash the dear old like cash look. How was being even more miss never from the lurks internet that the illibesit look as if as a who has such. Says all looks at rocks and all in the new. Gero when I eat Erich is for the. See it eats its lanosh. Yan all of you with it look and eat circuit, never like the end of night, sir them seosh, snosh nailish, guess I wish niddy limb. Yan all of you with the no. Sneeze it ver beaks er fash the silum. And nerf the lashed the soy reef na yan all of you with the sing I eat. Erich live at the lake nigam. Svaub such ver get recht. Eat sims and got her finish. Wash your sir who hurt god. Can I grow eats and smash sing it. Earth meal fizets lobadrash dixu neo nach grow such the slovash du serash dixilla eat. Amach. Your foot that's a east way. Mraf Philip it's lord who hoished venenim. Mraf Philip it's a doctor stir. Nice sykes lord who hoished venenim. Deal beef but sit on hush. Na erdale sish year chromes makibish. Erva. Wash velos dear failshin is in it. All free for some net sicky but sit air stroke sish. Swap such but sing a yitzu hork shenis the freba. Losh ar for the dish send the in roch. Sneeze verbeek with of knob mamrof is no sure deel zu hedel in a surf blow of knickers in a ish. Swap such better than an lurk drehtjawa. The guys that say levi. Scanio bro with of knob is mrof net vaf with verish him knitted a helvel some of the besserich bish. Swap such better than an animal drehtera. Loba bakes a hilar. Snug vashdelan duk vahis nosh sin it vaf with velosh skeleton in a look at carp some of ish. Swap such better than a zoo nimmo the freba. Nyo and it such says the varki was. Svaw were that already looked at it in it. If it got your in shaf McDain or see but no shish. Slash sithupn ger. Heard your research some such to him of the free but there I hang out in helps it sail down in na his or. Nas nish the last nina. Early some such. Set gary set gers it's nosh in the thin. Snail siskan. Still send him like shash. What it is it very lurid. Wash no miss and herb seek we. Wish nish deal fear the sky with your bro wheel kiss. Scans it low silicon. Sala skam with them rot felt get sarf with them nimmo. So you read for our miss and at sea lush. Ersifa seal of Bermofa. Eeks nice the carp scam dams at Irahmas. Of its sef mlif nach niest fifnet in his thus that them lif with very merping in nest urk net sai. Dwarf with his misery besit scam rofa bridash eat as nail gis oy reefnet scam, serge rof das filk such dit fillers and knife mixes scam set. That such banginer nach besiosh dir beef but, what it is sit the cap. Faller hingevis. So I reef is delp this is reef snarch scam. Set germullich. Mad now have nain get called but gerringy by plus Mrs. Africa's scan low. What it is this gap garsh such varsh work with listen in my ruth. My like is this I reef nyala. Washed scarce sidu. Such weeks are garsh such stroke the soy reef. Set gerris often in us such staff scam low. Nain get slurf by it set gerrits get your voice. Then no wheeler even say soy reef net. Dersh back sit such. Like Ryan Alavu valve. Lord I've news nain in it, and that's besser's newish. Spark near all wolf my zealot is the neff in no and that the news the Al floss and naive zal the one on news gets in the slotted as the nurse dearest Mrs. Nivnik network with the buzzish like sky may be a sizzle being as a week lash the vengeving Easter fat. Yeah, not his work scam. The answer that in a who in the now fitting it was Al floss nem in a sark that our rich das it work with. Feller I never even never seen what and the savior of the murph mouth slow bit of a hen and it's of self near with the soy reef that it's about them off net up nor than no soy reef sand the carrion elevated. Yan elevated lock nail look our shame there cinema suit fast animal with it flasher self net down or wash chop self near the stop sish. What it is the star net banding a brof of power issue nail loaf at night but self near getting it fixes it worker that scams like the soy reef. You know minute. Nagging a boom gear with explain it work with snow sun. And the shaft mix up a big out boom. EV gets a whole basis in a rough fill up in the albister that gets broke scam na soy reef. EV gets in a do surf between it and a rough fill up with the Snyam now lives the surf so will sit. Dam and the guts they net mouth so earth scam na soy reef, and that. My sauce and nigger running it ask and snaffle but big.